Funding for Elwood City Limits is brought to you by Leanne S., John DuLong, and Josias Melendez, listeners like you. Become a supporter of the podcast today at patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. Funding for Elwood City Limits is brought to you by Facebook,
Facebook.com/Elwood City Limits,
Twitter,
@ECL Podcast,
Tumblr,
ElwoodCityLimits.tumblr.com,
email,
ElwoodCityLimits@gmail.com,
and by contributions from listeners like you.
literally at ElwoodCityLimits.libsyn.com.
Thank you.
Cha-ching, cha-ching, baby. Get us off to start it with a great one.
Lucas,
Big ol'
spring is here, and seasonal allergies are kicking my butt, dude.
Yikes. Well, grab your Reactin, folks. Send out your best wishes to Will, because apparently he's in a allergy crisis right now.
Yeah, as the kids say, rip.
You're a bee, and your apartment's one big old pollen flower.
Yeah, something like that. So I'm gonna have to figure this out. I've been having seasonal allergies for a long time, and never seems to get any better. In fact, it seems to get worse year by year. So maybe this year is the year I do something about it.
Yeah, you're gonna. I'm. You know what? I'm mad at these allergies. I'm gonna do something about it. Like start a letter writing campaign or get a change.org petition going to outlaw pollen.
Yeah, that'll probably do as much as it sounds like it will.
That'll show them.
Hey, everybody. Kids, you're on Elwood City Limits time now.
It's Sniffles McGee with Elwood City Limits.
That's right. This is Will Young. Sniffles McGee is on vacation, and Lucas Mancini is filling in.
Ooh, my airways are clear. I'm ready to record the show.
Show off. Thanks a lot for joining us for another deep dive into Season 2 of Arthur. Happy to have you with us.
Season 3, Will. Wow, the allergies are really hitting you.
Yeah, my head is just...
Forgot what season we're on.
Normally, where my head is filled with Arthur knowledge, it's now just full of nonsense. Pure nonsense.
I just watched Annihilation the other day, and it's as if you're in Area X.
Ooh, no!
You can't think straight.
No spoilers. I will see that at some point this year. I should have seen it while I was in theaters.
It's a very odd film.
All right, so today we are actually getting near the end of Season 3. A couple more episodes to go, and this one has been one that's been a long time coming. It's Arthur's Dummy Disaster. And believe it or not, it's a George episode.
Finally, George has been on the sidelines, kind of in the background for a couple episodes. Has he had a speaking role yet? Like, has he had lines?
He had that one line that I always love to remember of in the episode where Brain and Francine were like arguing. He was on the sidelines with the soccer team, and his line was indubitably.
Right. And so prior to this, that was George's only time to shine. But right now, he is front and center.
Everybody's favorite moose. And the episode starts off here in art class. And everybody's kind of making their own projects. We've kind of seen this before a little bit, where the kids end up doing the same thing as everybody else. It's like when everybody wrote essays about wrestling.
And when it comes to like shop, there's only so many things you can make, right? And one of the easiest apparently is a napkin holder, which I'm not sure. I was going to ask you about this. Is that a thing? Like, is that a real thing? A board with 2 nails in it to hold your napkins?
So yeah, it's pretty simple. Like, my mother has a napkin holder, and basically you put the napkins in between where the 2 nails are. But what also helps is having like something to cover it with. That's how my mother's works, and it's not 2 rusty nails. It's actually made out of wood, I believe, and painted and all that. So the base theory is sound, but the execution on these is leaving something to be desired. They seem to have gotten the same bent nails, like for each of them.
Or either the nails were bent in the first place, or they were bent by the end of the building process. Like their technique, these third graders' technique led something to desire in terms of their shop skill.
Did you ever make anything cool in like a shop or family studies, as it's called over here?
No, I never took anything like that in high school or junior high. I think that's a lot more common in like the States to have a shop class, like a dedicated shop class. I did like make cub cars, which I guess would be called like Boy Scout buggies or whatever they're called in the States, where it's like a little piece of wood that you sort of sand down to be aerodynamic and then attach an axle and wheels to. That's the closest I've gotten to any of this thing. Or I think I made a birdhouse at some point, but never a napkin holder, never something as useful as that.
That cub car sounds pretty good. My best thing that I ever made in family studies when we had our unit on sewing was that I sewed a pair of pajama pants that I wore for a few years. I was really proud of those. Those held up really well.
Nothing better than a pair of pajama pants that you made yourself.
That's right. So everybody kind of ends up disappointing, although Muffy makes a pretty nice little change purse, which is the front runner until George, of all people, brings out of a briefcase the dummy of the episode. It's a wooden giraffe named Wally. And it turns out George, a really skilled puppeteer. First of all, the puppet looks really great. It's like a giraffe wearing several bow ties as well as like a suit. And he proceeds to, make some jokes and be the puppeteer for Wally, and he's really good at it.
He's very good at being a puppeteer and throwing his voice. These jokes, however, I mean, let me tell you, these are some King Kai level jokes.
I see somebody's been listening to All Systems Goku.
Well, I've been watching Dragon Ball Z along with them, and through my research, I have come to the conclusion that George would be very good friends with one King Kai.
Yeah, he's very much telling grade school joke book level jokes, and he's got a very it's almost like a parody of like a cruise line comedian.
Like a street comedian, like, hey,
yeah, well, and
very bow tie, flamboyant suit.
Yeah, just like very high pitched of just like, what did the banana say to the hippo? Nothing. Bananas don't talk. And like, ugh. And I also have to say,
how come you can tune a guitar, but you can't tune a fish?
Yeah, exactly. I will say the animation on Wally is also really good. It's impressive how they managed to communicate the fact that it's basically an inanimate object, but made him also very expressive. I bet that wasn't easy.
I noticed that too. The way they animate Wally is really fun. I think they were probably excited to draw an animal that wasn't the typical, like, one, sort of the arthrized on two legs bipedal animals, and two, not like Pal or later on Nemo, that's just like a regular animal. This is something a little bit more cartoony, and so they had fun with that.
So everybody's really impressed by George's skills, and then they kind of ask themselves, like, "Hey, how come we never really hang out with George? He's really funny." And I think it's Arthur says something like, "He's always been around, but I don't know him very well." And I feel like that could. I feel like that could stand for like all of the other side characters that are seen but not heard. I was like, how many more are there? Like, how many more Georges in the Rough are there?
There's Frank. Remember Frank?
Yeah, our buddy.
Where's his episode?
Our buddy Frank. There's like,
what's that groundskeeper that you love so much?
Oh, Gunky.
Gunky.
You love Gunky, dude.
I mean, who doesn't love Gunky? We all love Gunky. He could have his own spin-off show. Gunky's the Frasier of Arthur. Let's be real here.
And Gunky's just fun to say.
It is. It's just like kombucha. But I agreed with what you said about the way they sort of set up George's origin story with all the kids like coming to the conclusion of like, oh yeah, George, he's always been there. We've just really never noticed him because he's a bit of a wallflower. I think it's actually, they do it in a really respectful way that kind of paints George in a positive light of this introvert with a heart of gold. He gives Muffy's kind of talking about how in preschool he gave her juice when she spilled hers, and Francine talks about how he accidentally saved the big game when they were playing soccer. And I think they set up George's character in a really nice way because it's realistic. Like, George isn't cartoonishly introverted. He's just kind of a quiet guy. And there's definitely people out there like George, but that you always notice them. They're always around, but you haven't really taken notice of them. So I liked the way they did this.
Me too, and very well said. You're right; they didn't go as cartoonish with it as he could. He's just kind of shy, and I'm sure would like to be friends with them, but just has kind of trouble communicating that. Which, I mean, hey, some quiet kids have that problem in elementary school, and then adults like me have problems like that in the rest of our adult lives. I was wondering here when Francine did her cutaway about George, accidentally scoring the winning goal in soccer. He ends up accidentally stopping a would-be goal into their net with one of his antlers, and I was wondering, I wonder how much sensitivity moose have in their antlers. Like, how much do they feel when they get hit there, if at all?
I mean, if planet Earth is to be believed, those antlers, take some damage, sort of knocking each other about with them. So
yeah.
I really have no idea.
Just the wear and tear of everything you can get into. Yeah, a lot of the episode as it goes along is just George learning how to express himself and his humorous side through Wally, who becomes more of a fixture in their school lives. We get like a kind of extended scenes of Wally just doing various shtick on the kids. Like, at one point, he makes Buster laugh so hard milk comes out of his nose.
Yeah, again, and this kind of made me think more fondly of all the dad jokes Wally was talking at the start of the episode, because this physical comedy is real bad, which in a funny way. Like, I like how bad it is. Like, Wally at some point, I think it's Buster challenges Wally to eat and talk at the same time, and so Wally shoves his face in some pudding, and he's like, I'm eating, I'm talking, and that's what makes Buster shoot milk out of his nose. There's also a part where Wally's underwater with George, and Arthur and another character see him under the water, and Wally just goes glub 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 glub, and that makes them laugh under the water, causing a choking hazard, I might add.
Yeah.
And then finally we have this is something I had to mention, is that there's a part where he's playing baseball with Wally still on one hand, and Wally has his own baseball uniform.
That's dedication to craft, dude. I mean, who knows? George could be the next Carrot Top, or what's that horrible comedian's name?
Oh gosh, I know exactly who you're talking about. Jeff Dunham.
Jeff Dunham. That's it. Yeah, cool.
If only Wally was more racist.
No, thank you. But yeah, I was surprised that Wally can talk underwater somehow. But I guess George is just that good. He's got that hidden talent. He catches the winning or pitch or whatever it is. I don't know baseball terribly well. He wins the baseball game thanks to Wally. And everybody kind of gets dummy fever a little bit. They become almost like woogles because and also we get a little bit of a line here when he's describing how Wally is saying you just just get an object to put a face on it. Anything can be funny. And one of the kids has a moose puppet. And she's like, how's this? And Wally says, no, moose aren't funny. Rabbits are funny. Aardvarks are funny. Moose are not funny. So a little bit of self-deprecation on George's part through Wally.
And this line very much sums up George's mindset here in the episode. I thought this was a really well done part where they really don't hit you over the head with, obviously George is using Wally as a coping mechanism to help him be more social, and he sort of has a bad opinion of himself. He considers himself not funny, not outgoing, all these things, and he's sort of living vicariously through Wally. But it's actually a pretty dark line just to hear Wally say, of course, it's George's voice saying it, that moose are not funny. So matter-of-factly, and I like that they don't linger on it, they just kind of move on, but it's a really interesting choice, and I like that the way they spell it out, sort of.
Yeah, so everybody ends up, like side characters and all, end up getting various dummies with just like, or puppets painted with like faces on them and stuff. The one we focus on for a little bit, and if you ask me, a little bit too long, is Arthur's puppet, which he calls Artie. And I was kind of confused because, so what it is, it's Arthur with a stuffed bear that has like, it's well loved, you might say, because there's a lot of like stuffing that's kind of like leaking out of it. So is Artie supposed to be Stanley, or is it a different bear?
So I had forgotten that Stanley's name was Stanley. So I have no idea. Similar to Arthur, it would make sense if there was an Artie and a Stanley, because I had two bears that looked exactly the same, except one had well, actually, I had a multitude of bears that all looked exactly the same. Some of them were different sizes. I think I've talked about this on the show before, how they were all named after Guy Lafleur, the hockey player. And so there was Big Guy, Middle Guy, Little Guy, and then there was Other Guy, which was Middle Guy, but he had a ribbon instead of not having a ribbon.
I do remember this because we named a whole episode after it. Check out our past episode called Double Gee.
Double Gee, right? Double Gee. So maybe this whole Artie character is like a Gee scenario where he is the other Gee to Stanley's Gee.
Right. It could very well be. I'm not sure. Nobody's as good at ventriloquism as George is. Nobody has like as good of a puppet. Nobody's has as good a voice as him. Like Muffy's one just has her, like, it's like a Teddy Ruxpin almost, where it's like she has a tape in the back that just plays her voice.
Which I thought was so perfect. Like, at first people think DW's actually Muffy's actually throwing her voice, and she goes, no, it's a recording. Like, of course, Muffy would... And also, it's a doll of her, like, assuming it's custom made, because it's just a little Muffy. All too perfect that Muffy would have a custom-made doll of herself.
So, like I kind of said before, the real meat of this episode, the real good stuff, kind of stops here for a little bit, because we have to, like, see everybody else's puppets, and we especially have to spend time with Arthur as Artie, because he's kind of bringing him up in every aspect of his life, and it's beginning to annoy everybody. And there's a great part where, like, he's using Artie to pet Pal, and he also has a voice for him. It's basically Arthur's voice, but if he was like a witch, or if he like smoked a pack a day. He's just like, you like when I pet you, don't you, boy? It's like if Arthur was doing an impression of Gilbert Gottfried.
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed, like, we don't get as much, we get mostly Arthur's basically ventriloquism put on, but we get a little bit of everyone else's in this quick shot of, like, everybody's homemade, basically, dummies. And I liked hearing everybody kind of sort of put on a ventriloquism voice. Like, everybody sort of has a different voice they use, and I got a kick out of Arthur's. It is a little bit annoying, but I don't know why. I just kind of found it. You know what it reminds me of, Will? We talked about this as well before as well. What's that Adam Sandler movie called, Will, where it's the animated one, and Adam Sandler does all the voices?
8 Crazy Nights.
And that character you really like, that's like the worst character in cinematic history.
You mean Whitey? You mean Whitey?
Yeah, can you do the Whitey voice real quick for me?
Sure. Listen to me.
Oh.
No. Come on, Mr. Sandler. We got to go and save Christmas, okay?
Yeah, it's basically Arthur doing the Whitey voice.
That's a joy protector for your tushy.
Don't... By the way, if we're talking about this movie makes it seem funny or worth watching, you are 100% wrong. We are mischaracterizing it. It is an abomination.
It is very bad. Yeah, no, it's like I that's one of my more shameful laughs of my life. Like, something's wrong with me that I enjoy that voice, but that movie is no good. No good. Don't find out for yourself. There's a great part where, again, Artie is like petting Pal, and he just has this look on his face, this 1,000-yard stare of, like, you can tell he's barely containing like rage or annoyance, but he's just kind of sitting there and not enjoying it. I thought that was really funny. I also got to say, for Arthur's voice actor, the Artie voice sounded like it would probably hurt a little bit to record line after line. Especially like Arthur goes off on tangents, like his dad puts him in the drawer and he's like, "Hey, who turned out the lights?"
Oh my gosh, that part killed me. Like, just when Arthur's dad thinks he solved the Artie problem at the dinner table, Arthur just commits to the bit and he's like, "Oh, it's dark in here."
And then that whole saga kind of ends with Pal stealing Artie from Arthur in the middle of the night and burying him. But it kind of reaches a natural conclusion of, like, I don't know, some indeterminate amount of time later, everybody kind of gets tired of puppets, and basically the fad just ends, and for one reason or another. But the only one who doesn't want to let it go necessarily is George. He's still dragging Wally around, and this time Wally is looking pretty worse for wear. Like, his suit is all tattered. His neck is like barely hanging on its strings. He keeps like losing limbs. It's kind of weird, and everybody is really over the whole Wally thing. They're bored of his gags, which is weird. I found it a little odd that they got tired of him because his jokes never got better or worse. It's just that I guess over time they just kind of hit less and less.
I think that's the issue. It's the repetition. You know, the shtick got old. It didn't change in quality. It was just like, oh, here comes Wally.
Right.
Buster offers some bizarre advice to George. He goes, maybe you should stop playing with Wally for a while, as if like that will let Wally get better. It might have just been Buster playing third-dimensional chess to try and get Wally to not be around anymore because it was bugging him. But the way he phrased it was like, oh yeah, if you stop playing with Wally, his health will return. Which, well, that's just not how things work.
No, perhaps it's just absence makes the heart grow fonder, because Buster seemed to be Wally's biggest fan. Like, he was...
That's true. Buster was getting gut-busting at Wally.
Absolutely. So yeah, George keeps kind of insisting on keeping Wally everywhere, even though everybody's getting pretty annoyed with him. And it comes to a head when he kind of makes a joke in Ratburn's class. He like answers a question wrong, and then on purpose, and then he says, "Well, what would you expect? I'm a dummy." And everybody's like horrified. And Arthur has this great line where he says, "It's like, is he crazy? Ratburn's gonna destroy him." Which he means the puppet, but I just like the idea of like Ratburn is gonna destroy George.
Oh my gosh!
Like he's
I love this scene. This scene is so great because it's like the classic scene of like a character that you don't expect like stands up to an authority figure, like a well-established authority figure, and the tense, like you could hear a pin drop. Like everybody is so shocked. And the silence is just palpable. It's great.
Yeah, so Ratburn sees him after class and forbids George from having Wally in class anymore. And I'll be fair, George makes a pretty good point as Wally, where he's just like where Mr. Ratburn, like he's one to talk. He's got about 100 marionettes. I'm surprised that Mr. Ratburn wasn't impressed by Wally, of just like, wow, what craftsmanship.
For a second there, I almost thought that's where this was going, because all the kids are like, oh, finally, we got rid of Wally. And I was like, oh, is the twist here, the swerve here going to be that Mr. Ratburn's like, oh, I love Wally. I'm so proud of George. But no, he did the right teacher thing and said Wally was banned from class. And that just means George will go all the harder with Wally during lunch and after hours.
That's right. Speaking of after hours, that's where he's going to be bringing Wally. They have Fern scheduled a poetry reading, so we see poetry come up again outside of that one episode. So that was actually pretty cool. I like that after the poetry episode, they are still engaging with Fern and still writing poems.
Also, I think the most unrealistic thing in all of Arthur is the consistently large crowds Fern's able to gather for large amateur poetry readings.
Yeah, the stars are out at Fern's poetry reading at the library. In fact, George is like he's dressed to the nines. He and Wally have matching suits. But as he's getting ready to read his poem, Wally is like falling apart. Just like all of his pieces are coming off, and it's all unraveling. And he rushes out the door, and Arthur kind of sees him, and he brushes him off real quick. But he and Arthur, George and Arthur, have a bit of a heart-to-heart talk, at least through Wally. He's upset that it'll take forever to fix him. And then Arthur is positing that, well, they really liked getting to know George, not Wally. But then George counters by saying that, well, before Wally, nobody noticed George. He was just getting his antlers caught in his locker or knocking coats off the rack. He just, I believe he calls himself the dumb, goofy kid with the big horns.
And you know what? I felt bad because I know this scene is supposed to make us sympathetic to George, but him getting his antlers caught in the locker was a little bit funny.
I felt bad, especially considering I didn't know what kind of nerve ending those antlers have. That looks very annoying.
You're dedicating a lot of thought to what is this whole antler situation like? Well, I want to know the exact textures and tones to antlers.
Well, I wanted to have sympathy for the kid, and I was like, well, that's got to be annoying and maybe even hurt a little bit. So, I mean, it can't be pleasant if a part of your body is stuck in a locker, even if it's not made of skin.
Let alone your whole body. But I wouldn't know. This does seem like a common trope in Arthur now at this point, where Arthur walks out of a building to help someone who's isolated and at their lowest moment. I can't remember, or was it someone else helping Arthur? I feel like this exact scene has played out before us at least 4 times, where especially at the school, they're on the school steps, it's one character and Arthur, and they're sort of pouring their heart out, and it's what inspires them to go back in there. Do you know what I'm talking about?
It sure has, and that's a good point. I wasn't thinking about that at the time. Arthur did this with Buster in the episode where Binky stole his joke, and way back in season 1, Arthur came out to console Binky during the recital with Sue Ellen.
Maybe that's why I wasn't able to get as into this sort of George confrontation as 1. It's a little bit predictable, and 2, it's just I've seen this device used a couple times. But hey, Arthur's a good guy. He would want to go outside and help someone who is down on their luck.
Yeah, and after all, it's his show, so he's got to go over. It's like Joey Janela's spring break.
Oh my goodness gracious!
So he ends up convincing George to come back in without Wally and read his poem. What's the worst that could happen? So George meekly reads from his poem. He's still very nervous, but he manages to do it. It's a nice little poem. It doesn't take very long. And
is it his original poem, or is it a known poem?
No, I believe it's his original one.
What's it called? Bowl of fruit?
Fruit bowl or bowl of fruit, something like that.
Okay, you keep talking. I gotta figure this out.
Okay. And everybody likes it. In fact, Prunella calls it deep. And then finally, this is actually the end of the episode here, as everybody is glad that George has given up Wally for good and that they're excited to hang out with him. They're at a park eating lunch, and some kids are playing nearby, including DW. George walks into frame with Wally, but he actually goes over to entertain the kids with Wally for a little bit. And then he comes back to the table and he admits that he gave Wally away to a little kid who looked kind of shy. But it turns out that the kid he gave it to was DW. And DW inherits yet another thing we may never see again. I wrote here, see you never, Wally, because DW now has him. I forget I think she calls him Dolly. And
this is a very the Simpsons-esque situation of oh no, DW has a Wally, how annoying, and then it's everything's back in its place by next week. I'll also say this, Will. Upon further research, there are many, many more poems about bowls of fruit than I had expected.
Oh, really?
There are at least 6 different ones, and none of them are the one that George read.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and claim that as original, unless told otherwise.
No, I think it's very funny that Prunella thought it was deep.
Said in her own rather pretentious way. So
yeah, it's as if if Lil Pump performed an a cappella performance of Flex Like Ooh or Gucci Gang, I could see Prunella being wow, he's a regular auteur.
If I was able to edit video, I would totally just take the scene of George reading the poem and just dub over Gucci Gang.
Oh, just add Gucci Gang. That's good. Someone do that. Some of the Elwood City fans out there.
Yeah, please do that. I would love to see it.
And then leave Prudella going, oh, deep. At the
end. Yeah, absolutely. And now, a word from us kids.
And now, a word from us kids.
So much like George and the kids in the episode, or at least similar, the kids are making what they call ventriloquist dummies, but they're just kind of paintings of dummies.
Yeah, it'd be pretty difficult for them to actually have the same woodshop skills as George did and construct actual working dummies. So they basically put a big painting up in front of them, and a lot of the kids do a really good job. For as young as they are, there's some really, really creative artists in this class. Better pictures than I would have been able to draw at that age. And some of the dummies did make me laugh. One kid just draws Mario, which is very funny.
Yeah, I was like, Mario looks a little familiar.
He's like dollar store Mario, where he's Mario, but there's a few things that are just a little off. So you're like, and he's like, Mario's athletic. It's like, who do I know with that name that also has a red hat with an M that's also athletic?
Although the colors, to your theory, the colors are changed just enough so that you don't get suspicious.
Mm-hmm. My other favorite one was Mr. And I have to write this down phonetically because I don't quite remember how the proper pronunciation goes, but Mr. Gazoogleheimer?
Mr. Gazoogleheimer, yeah.
Yes, Mr. Gazoogleheimer, who has constant contests on how to properly pronounce his name, which the really funny bit about this was I think this kid was thinking, oh my goodness, Mr. Gazoogleheimer, what a crazy name. No one's going to be able to pronounce it properly. Smash cut to 4 kids getting it right their first try, which was very funny. And he was like, people are getting really good at guessing my name.
Yeah, I was like, I guess that bit didn't work. There was one of them, I can't remember which one, but that actually had a joke that kind of made me laugh. It was just like, my ventriloquist dummy likes to tell jokes, and he's like, why did the turkey cross the road? Because he wasn't a chicken. I'm like, that's kind of clever.
You're like,
that's not bad. That's probably like Wally's A material.
He's a ghostwriter for Wally.
Yeah.
Overall, a word from us kids has been getting more and more noteworthy, I feel like, these last few episodes. I really enjoyed the one last week where they were in the room trying to guess the noises, and this one was fun as well.
Yeah, this one was pretty good. It looked like a really fun project to do. I would have really liked to have done this in school myself.
That one guy did a 2-scale bungee jumper where he stuck his legs out and it looked like it matched the dummy's body.
That was really cool.
Yeah, that was good for that kid.
And now, back to Arthur.
And okay, now we move on to something a little bit different. The next story is Francine and the feline. We're talking about animals. I mean, no kidding. Straight to the jump on this one. Francine kind of talking about the types of animals that everybody would like to own, whether real or imaginary. So Francine says that she would like to own a Komodo dragon.
And if that couldn't fit a narwhal.
Yeah, that's right. I think when I was a kid, this was the first time I'd ever heard of a narwhal.
They're endangered, aren't they?
I feel like yes, but I couldn't say for sure.
If not, just because you don't hear about narwhals that often.
No, you certainly don't. There's other animals featured, including Buster would want a pterodactyl. Binky would like to have an amoeba because he hears they're very friendly. Arthur goes on about dogs a lot, and Brain at least has a visual cameo with his virtual hamster. How about that? That brought me back a little bit because I mean this was something, and I'm sure it still exists in some form today with the younger set, but back in my day, it was of course virtual hamsters. Tamagotchis were the big one.
I was in a Toys R Us not but 14 days ago, and there was a Tamagotchi for, I don't remember exactly how much money it was, but it was too much.
I can't imagine how sophisticated Tamagotchis have gotten since I last paid attention to them 20 years ago. There were also like Digimon variants of Tamagotchi, which I had one of those. I also had the virtual Pikachu pet that you could strap to your belt. And
What was the one? What was the one where you would scan barcodes and it would give you a different randomly generated creature?
Oh, that sounds familiar, but I don't know what it is.
And you'd like go to the grocery store and just like go ham.
Oh, like actual barcodes?
Yeah, you'd have to scan like actual like UPC barcodes, and it would generate a monster depending on the barcode. It was similar to how Monster Rancher on the PlayStation 1
I was going to say that, yeah.
would generate monsters from your CDs.
I don't know. That sounds familiar, but I can't place it. So that's gonna drive me nuts. Kids, let us know if you know what that one is. So yeah, it kind of took me down memory lane a little bit with the virtual hamster, and everybody's arguing about over like what the best animal is. We also get love the fake movie titles in Arthur. Buster is riding his pterodactyl to see Carpet of Doom 2. The sequel to the critically acclaimed Carpet of Doom.
Did they mention Carpet of Doom before as well? They must have, right?
It may have been like a visual reference of like it could have been on a marquee.
I love that. This can't be the first time I've heard of Carpet of Doom.
Speaking of Carpet of Doom, we get a little bit of a horror movie cam to start off the episode, following Oliver Frensky down at the dump. Something is spying on him as he's eating his lunch. By the way, love how Oliver eats his lunch while sitting on a fridge.
I really liked how the perspective which this is shot. It's the thing that's about to eat it's from the, I guess, unidentified creature that's about to eat his lunch's perspective, which I thought was really cool. And it even has the eyes blinking and everything.
Mm-hmm. Very much inspired, especially since like I watched the original Friday the 13th recently, and like, man, a lot of horror movies trade big on those POV cams. So I think they got it pretty much spot on. And of course you could tell pretty much immediately, of course, from the title and from the fact that it shows a cat's face as it skips forward in time, that Oliver Frensky has brought home a junkyard cat for them to have, which hopefully he discussed with his wife before doing so. And the cat goes largely unnamed for half the episode, so we don't really have a name for it just yet, but it's pretty cute looking. It's kind of small. It's kind of black on the top and white on the bottom.
Yeah, it's like I'm not too familiar with cat types besides like
me neither.
A Maine Coon or a tabby, or I really don't know my way around. It's certainly not a Siamese cat. I'm sure one of our more informed listeners can let us know what type of cat this unnamed kitty is. But yeah, good point about just bringing a cat from a junkyard home. That's like thousands of dollars worth of shots. I want to point that out.
Yes.
So especially for people living in an apartment like Francine's family, it's a pretty big change to the lifestyle, but whatever. It's a kid's show.
I mean, and of course I'm not much of an animal person, but I am a believer in the adopt, don't shop method.
That's true. Good on them for adopting.
Yeah, but you got to know what you're getting into, which is
exactly
why you adopt through the SPCA.
It's episodes like these that give kids expectations of you could just bring a cat home.
That's very true, and a common lie that TV told us when we were little. So Francine and Catherine both very excited. Catherine really into the idea of having a cat. And immediately just starts like baby talking it, and it was here that I immediately knew that Catherine would have an Instagram for her pet.
Oh
if
my
this
goodness,
were made
yes.
now.
For sure, Catherine would have a pretty popular Instagram regardless. I could tell like people would find Catherine very quote unquote aesthetic, but she would definitely be the type to have an Instagram for a cat.
And she'd probably have one of the ones where she like speaks in character for it. I have a friend. I have a friend.
Oh my goodness gracious!
I have a friend who does that for his dog, and that dog is more popular than you or I will ever be.
I recently become a fan of a YouTube video entitled "Maine Coon Cat Won't Leave His Bush." and it involves a Maine Coon cat that's in a shrub or like a bush, like a hedge, a trimmed hedge, and there's an Irishman trying to coax him out. And he says, "You won't come out your bush?" And then the cat goes, "Ah, wah, 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 wah. Ah, wah, 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 wah," like a person. And so that's a lot of fun. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's pretty good. The cat really doesn't want to get out of the bush, and it talks like a person when the Irish gentleman tries to take him out of the bush.
Okay, I got it. I'll check that out later. So
it's right up it's right up there with Dog Eats Broccoli, which is another favorite of mine, and Pig Eating Cookie Under Blanket.
I think I've seen both of those. But speaking of viral animal videos, I mean, this leads me to a point where, so the next day, like, Francine is talking with Brain, Buster, and Arthur about how...
I loved this part. I love this part.
You loved this? Oh, okay. Is talking about how she got a cat, and then her immediate reaction is, "Ew, gross, you got a cat?" And my immediate reaction to this was, first of all, confusion, because it's all of the boys reject the idea of cats because they're like cutesy. And I was trying to remember, did kids/boys ever hate cats this much because of how they were gendered?
So no, I would say I brought too much of the real world into my interpretation of this, because the first thing you're going to hear on the internet if you mention that you have an affinity for either a dog or a cat is all the negatives of your side and all the positives of the other side. Dogs versus cats is one of those age-old questions, like, is a hot dog a sandwich? Or if a dog wore pants, which way would he wear them? That has concerned the internet for eons. All sort of different opinions when it comes to what's better, dogs or cats. As someone who's been working at a cafe recently, I'll tell you this much. When you do a tip war, when you have like 2 tip jars, and you put a picture of a dog and a picture of a cat on each, and it's like, okay, tip whichever jar you like more, it's always neck in neck. People are very, very opinionated when it comes to what's better, dogs versus cats. They made a whole movie about it, Will.
Yeah, I think they made a couple. It just seems like a really silly divide, but then again, they are kids, so that's what childhood is. A bunch of silly
trust
divides.
me, adults do it too.
Yeah, that's true. But I was also thinking, like, this episode could only have been made before the dawn of, lolcats, cat memes, cat videos, because it seems like cats have never been more popular, and to be so outwardly anti-cat is like almost unthinkable to me. And I mean, you don't have to like cats or anything like that, but usually the strength of the pro cat party is the strength of their voices is very loud indeed.
You don't have to like cats, you just have to respect the social media hustle.
Respect the hustle. So yeah, I thought that whole thing was weird, of like how they were grossed out by cats, but maybe I just don't get it. So Catherine has basically adopted the cat for its own, and she gives it like this really frilly makeover. It like dresses it in little clothing, gives it like a froofy little cat bed, and the cat doesn't seem to especially like it. And Francine says that the cat has been ickified and that you're ruining its catitude. In fact, Catherine calls the cat Rose Petal.
So I don't know what's worse, the outfit that Catherine puts the cat in, or Francine using the words ickified and catitude. It's pretty neck and neck.
Yeah, I don't know if I can make a value judgment there. They're both pretty bad, but at least Francine is 8, so I'd expect that out of her. Catherine, I think, a little too old for this. And in fact, I'll say right here, I don't like dressing animals in clothes. Like, that's never been a big thing for me. But then again, I'm not an animal lover, so take my opinion as far as you want to. Cat seems to have a more of an affinity for Francine because it ends up sleeping on top of her, and Catherine accuses Francine of trying to steal the cat's affections. And gotta say, as someone who has had a cat sleep on top of him, not that bad.
I would be worried I'd squish it.
Yeah.
That would be my main concern, not for my safety, but for the cat's.
Like I was sleeping on a couch, and my friend's cat just kind of ended up perching on me, which woke me up a couple of times. But then I eventually fell asleep, and then I woke up, and then he was asleep in my lap, and I'm like, oh, that's That's kind of nice.
I guess this is as good a time as any to let you know that in my personal life, we've been kind of thinking about getting a cat over here at Casa de Mancini. We still have to, figure out some things about, like, is it allowed in the building and all that stuff. But I'm someone who has grown to like cats later on in life. I've always been a hard team dog person, but it wouldn't be responsible to get a dog in this little apartment. But this episode has provided some valuable possible cat names. I got to keep Rose Petal in the back of my mind. There's a name later on in the episode that might be of use. The only other thing I could think of was Normal from the Garfield comics, and I think it's just because I like saying the word normal out loud.
Yeah, Normal's pretty good. And Francine and the cat end up really bonding after this. Like, they end up pretty much playing together, and the cat seems to be a lot more playful and rambunctious than kind of serene and dignified like Catherine wants it to be. And I like how Francine and the cat's relationship grows pretty naturally. Like, they just have fun with each other, and eventually they become pretty good friends.
I loved when Rose Petal attacks the bread like she's a bodega cat, and like the loaf, ignoring the food, grabbing the loaf of bread, and the way like it pulls it down. That's a viral video right there.
Now, not to get on your case about this, Lucas, and of course, with a name like Rose Petal, I kept having to mentally correct myself.
Oh, my goodness.
But
how could I make such a big mistake? I apologize, Will, already. I know what you're going to say.
But the cat is actually a male.
Mm-hmm.
But I can understand your confusion. Picking up on kind of the thread from the last time Francine was hanging out with the guys, like, we really get a look at like Arthur's anti-cat leanings. And
see, this is when Arthur, I liked the earlier confrontation because it reminded me of like people being cats versus dogs on the internet. Arthur at this point starts to really get on my nerves because it's totally irrational, and it just gets down to like the way he's ignoring facts is downright annoying.
He's like prejudiced in a real way against cats, and for no discernible reason other than the fact that he likes dogs better. Like, at one point, it's Francine says, "You don't know my cat," and Arthur says, "I don't need to know a cat," and he explicitly says, "It's stupid. All cats are stupid."
Which I did kind of like that line, just because just the audacity of it made me laugh. But I almost thought they were going to show a flashback of like Arthur being attacked by a cat as a child, because they really don't earn his prejudice against cats.
No, they just kind of needed like an antagonist in this episode, and Arthur just comes across like a jerk. Like every time somebody talks about cats, he's just like, "Can we please stop talking about cats?" And it's just like, dude, we know people who are cats, which of course makes it extra weird. But yeah, it just seemed wildly not wildly, but just seemed out of character for Arthur to be this stringent and anti-cat. In fact, he has like a nightmare about it where like Francine's home is overrun by cats, and like his whole mistrust and hatred of cats is based on like an urban legend he heard once about how a cat bit a kid's ear off, even though pretty much everybody he talks to says that's not true. Like, that didn't happen.
Was Coco the killer cat before this or after it?
What do you mean? I don't know. Who's Coco?
There was a national news story where a cat attacked a family, like a house cat, and the guy like locked his whole family in a closet to avoid like his killer cat, and then he like wrote a book about it, and he was on like late night shows about like, oh, I survived my killer cat. That was the most mainstream, like, the phrase killer cat is like, that's where I first heard it, was from the Coco the Killer Cat media tour. So when I heard that phrase in this episode, "Get that killer cat away from me," I think Arthur says it. That's what I first thought of. And I was like, oh, was this? I remember Coco the Killer Cat being on Leno. So was like this the 90s? Like, was that before this? Maybe that is partly the inspiration to the urban legend of the cat biting off the kid's ear.
I've never heard of that before. That's I couldn't tell you. So Francine brings the cat around to meet Pal, and she names the cat Nemo. So her cat's name is Nemo. We can finally refer to it by its proper name.
There we go, Nemo.
Arthur is skeptical, and again, he's being very flagrantly anti-cat. He's just like, he says stuff like, "Pal doesn't need any cats for friends," and Nemo and Pal have a little chase around the house, but Francine insists that they're just playing. And he does, in fact, say, "Your cat is trying to kill Pal," which is kind of
again. Maybe it's just something with me personally, but people misjudging animal behavior is like a pet peeve of mine. Maybe it's because I've experienced a lot walking my own dog and having people grossly misread the situation and be like, get control of your dog. He's out of control. When anybody who has a dog would know that he's just playing, or they're obviously misreading the situation. So to me, even these cartoon animals, I'm like, oh, they're playing. And to see Arthur overreact to that point, it's like, he's bugging me so much.
We've established before how much Arthur loves Pal, but he's really overprotective of him to the point that Pal, as you can kind of tell, really enjoyed playing with Nemo and doesn't like being kept away from him because Arthur misread the situation. I mean, as somebody who doesn't know a lot about pets, I definitely have misread a lot of animal intentions in my lifetime. I just straight up don't know a lot.
Also, so Pal likes Nemo at this point, and I might be putting the cart before the horse here, but I know Nemo is not like Spanky or even Wally or Toady or the numerous amount of side characters that are sort of introduced and then forgotten. Nemo does indeed come back, but he's sort of more of an antagonist to Pal later on, correct?
That's right. It's going to be weird to compare and contrast Nemo's appearances later on in the show, especially when he starts talking, to what we're seeing now, which is Nemo.
Wait, what? What? A talking cat?
I'm a talking cat. No, we'll get there. We do get a nice bit where Francine kind of claps back at Arthur. Earlier in the episode, Pal steals something from DW, and Arthur, like a cracker or something, and Arthur chalks up to him being smart because he's teaching her not to leave her food lying around. Francine brings Nemo to school, and Nemo eats Arthur's sandwich, and she's like, maybe she's teaching you not to leave your food around. I was like, ooh, got him.
Though it is crazy how that cat eats that sandwich in one gulp.
For sure. That cat is hungry. So, of course, this gives Arthur even more reason not to like Nemo. I believe at one point in their first encounter, Arthur says not to bring Nemo over anymore. So I'm definitely not on Arthur's side here. But Francine, with a huge overstepping of boundaries at this point, after Arthur has said, don't bring the cat around anymore, Francine answers with Nemo on his leash, and she says, "You obviously didn't mean what you said about not bringing Nemo," to which I was like, nope, you don't get to say that. That is not for you to say. And that
is a very good point.
That bugged me like crazy.
Ugh, they're both bugging me at this point. I feel like the episode loses a little bit of steam here, just because it's like, who am I supposed to like in this episode besides Pal and Nemo themselves?
I think that's the real answer. I think that's the that's the true ending right there, is that Arthur and Francine, forget about him. Pal and Nemo are the people you should like, and I agree. I think Nemo's pretty cool, and Pal's one of my favorite characters. So I'm Team Pal all the way.
If only they had their own episode where they talk. Oh, way.
Well, we'll get to know them. We'll get to know them even more.
A cat talking, that would never happen.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, to your point, Lucas, they're Pal and Nemo are kind of playing again, and Arthur really banishes Nemo and Francine from his house. And
he describes it as something in a nature special.
And he's telling this to his parents, and Dad Reed tells him, maybe I think Nemo was just playing. That's how animals play. And Arthur's just again basically refutes the facts, and it's very, especially in the world we live in now, it's very frustrating.
I agree.
So by chance, Arthur and Francine meet with their pets on the street, and they both wiggle out of their harnesses and just chase each other around in fun. They chase each other into the garage. Dad is bringing out a Statue of Liberty made out of what seems to be fruits and vegetables, and I want to know more about that.
I always want to know more about like Arthur's dad's cooking. It's little details like that always make this show so special. Like whenever they have a chance to add some depth to the world to make the world seem a little bit more lived in and larger, and little details that make you curious about other things that are going on without explicitly spelling them out, it always adds life to the Arthur universe. So Dad's cooking's a part of that, where it's like, what's Papa Reed cooking up next?
Arthur runs into Dad's kitchen to chase them both, and we get this weird kind of mystery shot of like, what happened? Is Arthur okay? And then they both, Francine and Dad, come in, and he actually takes a liking to Nemo. Like Nemo licks his ear a little bit, and Francine's like, "Oh no, did he bite it?" And he's like, "No, it tickles." So he seems to have maybe not gotten over his prejudice, but at least cooled on it a little bit. But the episode does end with Francine and Arthur bickering about which animal is smarter, and by this point, I had just had enough.
I was like, guess what, guys? A pig would be smarter than them both, according to testing. So
very, very true. And I just ended up wishing that the episode, or rather that Pal and Nemo had stayed friends in light of episodes to come much later. So stay tuned for that, kids, and don't get too attached to your new favorite tag team, Pal and Nemo. All right, so from dummies to animals, let's go back to Arthur's dummy disaster. What do you think of George's debut episode here?
I think it was a long time coming. I know a little bit of extra information about how George is sort of represented on later on in the series, so I was excited for him to become a little bit more of a character. I think the dummy gimmick is really interesting. It doesn't really let us get a great picture of who George is, because he's sort of being Wally for so much of the episode. But the Wally character is fun. The jokes are hilarious, especially when he's like eating the pudding and making Buster laugh through his nose. And I think the lesson's great. I love the way they set up George being an introvert and sort of everybody remembering George is always there, but never sort of paying attention to him. And I think the Mr. Rappard segment near the end is a really good suspenseful moment where everybody's like sort of holding their breath. The only criticism I have at the episode is they use once again the device of someone's outside the school and Arthur has to walk out and sort of talk them into going back into the school. And I kind of got unfocused there and stopped paying attention just because I'd seen it so many times. But besides that, I really did enjoy the episode.
So I appreciate more what this episode did more than kind of what it was. And I think the biggest success was establishing the character of George. I think it's because I relate to the person that George is. Very quiet, very introverted, like you said. I think you made some great points during our talk about the episode, Lucas, and kind of using coping mechanisms to help himself kind of get out of his shell a little bit. And it struck a chord with me, and I felt that I could really relate to who he was. And as that, I felt that George was immediately a much stronger character. And it was also very heartwarming to have the kids be open to being friends with George. Like, they didn't think that he was weird or anything. They just admitted they didn't know a lot about him and would like to be friends with him, which was very nice. I mean, it would be easy, especially in real life, for kids to just dismiss the quiet, awkward kid as just weird and not talk to him. But they do seem to want to connect with him once they essentially discover him. The rest of the episode I thought was okay. I liked Wally pretty well, especially in terms of the animation. But, you know, he does kind of get on your nerves, which he's supposed to. And like I said before, I felt the episode kind of ground to a halt in the middle with the talk about with the segments about the puppets and the focus on everybody else. So it wasn't structured in the way I would have liked it to be. But a great start for George, and I'm really looking forward to him being more part of the show at large. Francine and the feline. So again, we kind of, the success of this episode is at least kind of establishing a pet character for Francine. And I actually thought that the parts where she was interacting with Nemo were pretty cute. I liked the dynamic more of the struggle between Francine and Catherine. of whose cat it is. And I almost feel like that should have been the episode instead, because the other conflict of the episode I thought was actually pretty bad. Like, Arthur being this like secret cat hater that we now have to establish in 11 minutes is really dubious, and I thought just made him look like a completely unsympathetic. And again, once again, I'm not much of an animal person, but I don't hate cats. I don't hate dogs or anything like that. It's just there's no real reason for him to be this way, but they kept having to propagate him like this to be, to be this really reprehensible person, or at least have this reprehensible view. It almost felt like, and I don't think this is what they were going for, but it almost felt like they were trying to do an allegory for like not for like prejudice, like not letting your own internal biases get in the way of like making new friends or relationships. But that didn't really work either, so I don't want to ding them for that. But either way, it was just kind of I was not very interested in this episode, and in terms of the debate of cats versus dogs, like I have no time for it. So it didn't do much for me at all.
You took the words right out of my mouth when you said that you would have preferred the episode be about the struggle between Catherine and Francine and sort of them being introduced to the new cat. Like, that's this episode's strong suit. It would have been much better suited as an episode with them sort of deciding like, oh, like, whose cat is this really? Like, how are we going to treat this cat? Is it going to be all girly, or is it going to be sort of rambunctious? And then 2, I would have liked to seen an episode about them sort of similar to maybe this is already tread water because we did it with Arthur, but tread ground, excuse me. But an episode about them, learning the responsibilities of taking care of a cat and what that entails. Because that's something that's almost wholly missing from this episode. Instead, you're right, we get this bizarre conflict with Arthur sort of being anti-cat that the worst part of all is it doesn't really have a conclusion. Like, he laughs when Nemo's licking his ears at the very end of the episode and then goes immediately back to arguing about which animal is smarter. So it doesn't really have, like, Arthur doesn't, like, he gets over his weird anti-cat stance just enough to let Nemo play with Pow and hang out, but he's still, like, set in his ways. I wrote down that it's like a really weird ending to the episode. Like, they get so close to having a conclusion with, okay, here's this action of your dog kidnapped my cat, your cat kidnapped my dog, they're both running away, and I'm like, this is obviously going to come to a head and we're all going to get along in the end. But they come just short of that, and Arthur is still set in his ways at the end of the episode. I thought it was just kind of bizarre.
Bizarre is a good word for it. And, I mean, thankfully, I'm looking forward to hopefully better episodes with Nemo as a character later on.
That's true. I have nothing but positive things to say about Nemo, excuse me. I love the way he's drawn. I love his color palette. I love the way the cat's animated. The characterization of the cat's really fun. I'm excited to see more of Nemo, just not excited to see more of anti-cat Arthur.
Yeah, as long as that kind of stays out of it. All right, so a little bit of a mixed bag this week. They can't all be winners, but certainly don't regret my time watching an episode of Arthur and talking about it. So what did you think? We would love to know. There are plenty of ways to get in touch with Elwood City Limits, and we certainly hope that you do. You can get in touch with us over on social media, facebook.com/Elwood City Limits, at ECL Podcast on Twitter, ElwoodCityLimits.tumblr.com. Got some new anonymous asks this week, not even specifically about Arthur. So one of our anons asked us if we liked the episode of SpongeBob called Band Geeks, which I proudly said.
SpongeBob called Gang Geeks.
Me too, and I was able to proudly say that as well. So love that episode. If you want to ask us pretty much anything in relating to Arthur or not relating to Arthur, you can do that. A great direct way to do that is elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. You can hear the episode the way you heard it, whether that's elwoodcitylimits.libsyn.com. Maybe you found us through Google Play, or if you found us through Apple Podcasts. Thank you for the 5-star reviews over there. Rate and review so that more people can find our great Arthur podcast, and we can make some friends along the way. And finally, I did a new bumper for the start of the episode, but we've got some Patreon supporters. We want to thank you very much for the money that you've put to saying thank you to us for the show, and we want to say thank you for your support. Our loyal Patreon subscribers, You can go to patreon.com/Elwood City Limits if you want to kick us any amount of money to say thank you and to have your name on the show.
We're also a part of the Atlantic Podcast Registry. There's a list out there of podcasts made from where we're from, Atlantic Canada, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland, I think, maybe even some in PEI. And it's a list of like 50 or so. We're the 50th show to be added to the list. There's some other pretty famous ones in there, Sick Boys and what have you. So you can check us out on the Atlantic Podcast Network as well.
That's podcastatlantic.com. Thank you for reminding me, Lucas. All right, next time. We are marching closer and closer to the end of Season 3.
Oh my goodness, it's like I hardly knew it. Just like April leaving so quickly, I can't believe we're almost halfway through April or over halfway through April. Season 3 of Arthur, it's gone just after I met it.
That's right. We got 2 more episodes to go. Next week, we're going to be talking about Mom and Dad Have a Great Big Fight, along with DW's Perfect Wish.
Oh my gosh, I wonder what Mom and Dad Have a Great Big Fight is about.
Well, I know what it is, but I'm not telling you. I'm going to leave you in suspense, leave you wondering until we get together next time. And as soon as we're done recording here, I'm going to blow my nose. I've had to do so for the past half hour. If you couldn't hear me sniffling in the background, and apologies if you hate the sound of sniffling. All right, so if you're suffering from seasonal allergies, I hope yours get better, as I hope mine do as well. My name is Will Young for Elwood City Limits and for Lucas Mancini.
It's like an Edgar Allan Poe cat.
We'll see you next time. Have a great week.
It's even black! Mostly.